Yo, what's up everybody? It's Brilly, and today I'm really excited to show you one of my favorite tools, which is the Render Network. I've been using it now for over 2 years for every project. Personal projects, client projects, doesn't matter. I've been using it non-stop. Even more so, I stopped upgrading my GPUs here on my machines. I've got 10 GPUs split over 3 machines, and I've stopped upgrading them because I just rely on the Render Network. It's super efficient, it's affordable, and it's really easy to use. It's like all the things that kept me from using other render clouds and systems and farms and stuff like that before. It is really, really easy to use. And so today what I'm gonna do is I wanna show you how I use it on the daily. I wanna show you from beginning to end so you can use it too. So let's hop into Cinema 4D. Let's open up a project file here. Let's go through every step that you need to know to start utilizing the Render Network for your own projects and work as well. It saved me on deadlines. It saved me on personal projects, clients. It doesn't matter. It's been absolutely great. And I think you're gonna find that too. So let's just jump in and do it. All right, so here we are in our 3D program, and I just want to walk you through some of what I've got going on here in my file. So I do have a rig character in here. I do have some deformers, some live active procedural deformers. I've got some subdivision surface, some set at 3, some set at 2. I've got my Octane camera with post-processing, as well as the camera imager turned on, as well as the spectral AID noiser turned on. I've got fog volumes in my scene. The reason I'm sharing all this is because you're going to see that all this is going to export. All this, I've got my HDRI set up. I'm also using some plugins. I've got the Grayscale Gorilla HDRI link with some GSG textures, so outside texture sources. I absolutely love the Render Network because when we export this ORBX file, it is going to give us one packaged up .orbx file containing everything, all of our animation, all of our plugins, all of our textures, every single source. So it's not like something where you have to go in and say save project with assets and make this folder and then upload that, or check the render farm and make sure they have the available plugins and everything's up to date and it's the right version number. We don't have to do that. It's just going to break down into this simple .orbx file. We're going to be able to check that, make sure it's all working great, and then we're going to be able to hop right back in and upload that to the Render Network without having to think anymore. So the next thing I want to share with you is if you've ever done any kind of ORBX export before, or you've watched older or previous tutorials from someone else, you've probably seen that they go into the live viewer in Octane and go to export to, and you do an animated package ORBX or something like that. Well, that is not how you're going to be doing it anymore. There is a way that is more efficient and works better, so less errors and things like that. Now, I actually never experienced any real errors exporting the ORBX package from the live viewer. However, there were a couple little glitches that could happen on occasion. So it's just best to do it with the most up-to-date way out of Cinema 4D, which is through the render setting. And these aren't the render settings in the Octane. They're not the Octane settings. They're actually the render settings here inside of Cinema 4D. So let's open up our render settings, which is Control B or Command B here. And let's go into Octane Render. And let's open up this ORBX exporter. Okay, you can see that I've already kind of got mine toggled on because I had already submitted this to the Render Network. But by default, that's going to be I think by default, everything's going to be unchecked, and this will be blank here. So you want to enable this. I'm going to say ignore rendering. Otherwise, it will render out one image of and save it into a location. You can see here, I have it checked to ignore, but if I uncheck it and deselect that, I'll be able to save its path. So I think by default, if I check that, it turns that off. Let's try. Let's see. No, I don't know. Okay. But it won't save it to that path either way. So I want to ignore that rendering aspect and open in Standalone. I want to open this in Standalone the minute it finishes exporting, because here's the start export. The reason that's so important is because you want to check your file before you send it to Render Network. And you want to do this anytime you're rendering any kind of major project on anything. You should check that file before ahead of time and make sure it looks exactly how you want. And if you've ever used any kind of render farm prior, it's always really good to do a lower res version first, to do something that's like half or quarter res or something that's got way less samples to it, right? That kind of stuff is really important too. Go and check it and make sure it's rendering correctly before you submit the full final one. That's going to cost a lot more. That's higher resolution, a lot more samples. Do something small and just like look at it. It's going to cost you cents, literally pennies in most occasions, just to check and preview it, make sure it's working. Do, a sequence. You don't have to do all 1,000 frames. You could do 20 frames. Just make sure it's rendering and everything looks right. The other thing before we hit start export that I want to talk about here, well, actually, you know what? Let's hit start export. Let's set up where your file path is, and this is where it's going to save this out. I'm going to just change the file name of it. So it's going to save the ORBX file at this location, and I'm going to click start export here. Now in this file, and it says, hey, there's no specific file name. Yes, that's fine. I don't want to save this frame out. I already have the frame. So yes, I want to continue here. And our picture viewer will open up, and you can see here that I'm got a sequence, so 1 of 73, and it's calculating this frame. While this is happening, I'm just going to move this over to the side. One thing I want to discuss, and you can see, actually, I'll move this back in. You can just see it's kind of cooking through this very quickly here and making that animation. I do have an animation here with camera movement and object positional movement and all that as well. And then once it's done with this sequence, it will open up automatically in our Octane standalone so we can preview it. And just packaging up a file like this is so simple. It's one of the reasons I love Render Network even more, because you don't have to worry about your plugins or animation. Now, something that the render team recommends and says that you should do is you should bake any animation, especially any kind of procedural animation and things like that, or cache any kind of simulation, particles, all that stuff. You should bake all that information in. Now, I always skip that. Okay, I never do it, and I've never come into any issue with any kind of animation I've done. That doesn't mean though that you should follow that practice, but I always check everything ahead of time and make sure everything's rendering correctly. But now you know how to at least troubleshoot. If you're doing something and something gives you an error and it's like, oh well, I remember Brilly was like, yeah, you gotta bake that stuff out. So now it's just finished. So pretty soon it's going to be launching that standalone. But back to the animation. So if you have those kind of procedural animations, make sure you bake all that stuff, and it will function way better on the Render Network. So here you can see automatically launching the Octane standalone. Make sure you have the standalone installed on your machine. And then the other thing is, just in case, if you go into your Octane settings, for some of you, this could happen where it doesn't know where your Octane standalone is located. So when it's ready to launch, it's going to say, hey, check your Octane settings because we can't find standalone. Just make sure your path is set up correctly here. And so Octane application, and just make sure you locate that on your C drive, and that's linked up. So if you do get that error that it's missing it, you can just go there and make sure it opens right up here. So you don't need to know Octane standalone to do this. You really just need to know how to make sure you can launch the render here. And here it is. It's this node right here, the render target. All you have to do is select it. Just click it. And then it's just going to kick off the live render in the viewport here, just like you're used to. So I'm just going to move around and make sure that this is looking exactly how it looks in my render. Yep, all the glass shows up exactly how I want it. I see the reflections, the HDRI's in there. Everything came over exactly how I was hoping for it to go. You can pause this at any point. You can scrub through the timeline, whatever you need to do to check to make sure your scene is good and going. But now I feel like I've tested this. So let's get into the Render Network itself. So I'm just going to close out of the standalone, and let's go to rendertoken.com. Now you could just skip this and go right to it's RNDR. Well, we'll just go. I'll pull up the address here in a minute. This is really nice to go to Render Token. just to read up about it. There's a lot of really great information. If you're just confused about the topic in general, this is why this is so amazing. It's really scalable. It's super affordable. We'll get into all those fun details here in a moment. And then you can hear the amazing Jules Urbach talk about his GPU cloud rendering here in a moment too. And then this artist portal tab, you'll see in the top right corner. If you click that, it's going to bring you into a login page. Obviously, mine has jumped right to, it's saved my information. It's jumped right into my render account where I got my jobs and my scenes and all that kind of fun stuff. But you'll just put in your username and account that you have with OTOY. If you have any of those licenses through OTOY, you'll be able to get this. Yeah, so just to reiterate, any of those OTOY subscriptions will give you access to the Render Network. So here we are in Render Network. You can see that I do a heck of a lot of rendering. I render, like I mentioned earlier, all my personal work, all my client work. I render everything through here, and it stores it. It saves it. Like it's more than just something that's rendering it. Like you can go through, and if you change from jobs over to scenes, jobs are the jobs that I've submitted and have completed or partially completed or wherever I came to on them. And scenes is where we're going to upload our scenes at and create and submit our jobs. But look, I have all the jobs I've ever created. I can always go back into them. Let's say I lose everything on my hard drive. I can come back up to the Render Network, and here everything is. I don't have to care if I don't have that plugin anymore, or where that texture go, or where that file is. It exists here. I can always resubmit it. So let's say I lose my hard drive and I'm like, oh, I really wish I had that animation. I could just export another one and I get it right back. So it is almost like a really nice way to save your files as well. Okay, let's bring up and import in that ORBX file that we just made. So I'm going to, you can just drag it in there, but I have this located here. So I'm just going to grab it and grab that ORBX file. I got my little ORBX folder, and here it is, my Vision Series 03. That's the one that we just made together, and it will say, hey, it's uploading. Now, here's a nice little quick tip. I'll actually embed this little quick tip in a new quick tip series that I have coming up for Octane. But if you zip your ORBX file, a standard .zip, it will actually upload faster to the Render Network, and it will distribute to the render nodes quicker as well. So it'll distribute to all the GPUs and all the other computers faster. So highly recommend that you just put it in a standard .zip folder and then upload it. So with our file, our ORBX file almost uploaded here, I also want to talk about one of my other favorite aspects of the Render Network, which is the support team. The support team has been absolutely amazing for me. Unbelievable response time, amazing support in any issues that I've had, any problems that I've noticed, and they just have solved everything, any problem or issue that's ever come up, any complication. If you're confused about something, check this out. Right here down in the bottom right, instantly they've got this little chat window. You can get talking with somebody instantly. I've hit them up, and they know this. I've hit them up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., all through the early a.m. times, all through the day, all through the night. And there's just somebody always available. It's kind of wild, to be honest with you, but it makes me feel so much more comfortable for me using the Render Network, knowing that like when I'm got a client job, or if I have a deadline or a tight turnaround, and if any issue arises, I have that support there to make sure that I can still get that job done. It's been invaluable having the Render Network, and the support team that comes along with it has been crazy. So once you upload, it is going to process this this ORBX file. So you can see here it says processing. This usually takes really quick. See, already done. Now I can just say create new job, and let's go through some of the standard stuff here. Okay, so this is where we can control, it's got all the sample, whatever I had as a sample count from my previous settings inside of Octane and Cinema 4D. It's got that. It's got my aspect ratio. It knows all the frame rate. That's an important thing to kind of take note too. If you do have an animation, make sure your animation stuff is set up here. So I've got 24 frames a second. Here's my frame count. This is my standard height, because it's going to bring all that information. It doesn't mean, though, that in the render network here, it doesn't mean that we can't change that. Like, I could come in here and say, you know what, instead of 650 samples, let's go 400 samples. Instead of 2000 by 2000, let's go 1000 by 1000, right? You can change all these numbers. You can say, hey, let's just render the first 10 frames. Let's do a custom range in our sequence. Fine, go for it. And actually, I highly recommend it. I really recommend to do a test render. Like I said before, go super low sample count. Go 500 by 500. It's going to cost you next to nothing. And it's going to be worth so much more in value when you can see that the render actually looks good, and then you go and submit the final one after. All right, cool. So let's just go to the continue to output section here. All right, this is where you can add what your output is. So PNG, EXR, deep image output. So if for this one, I'm just going to do a PNG. But if you select something, you're like, oh, wait, how do I get back? Just say remove output. And then you can go back in. It's like, oh, actually, I want to do an EXR, remove output. Let's just look at the EXR for a second. Obviously, you can change your bit depth here, compression, DWAA, DWAB, or zip. I really recommend that you have some sort of compression on whatever it is that you're doing. Otherwise, it will be super, super heavy. And just do it. Those compressions look great. And then PNG, right? Bit depth. Everything's really kind of basic here. Force tone map checked on by default. Everything's good to go. So I'm just going to say continue to network settings. Before I do that, let's just look at the EXR real quick. You do have checkboxes for multi-layer files, adding metadata in it, and tone map. So you might want to check some of those on, right? If you're using those in your settings. And if you need that. But multi-layer files and really long sequences can get kind of heavy when it comes to the time when we want to download our image sequence, where you might want to use a download manager. And this is a download manager. I'll recommend it directly from the render team here. It's a free download manager, and this could be necessary to use if you have massively long image sequences that you have to download, or really heavy multi-layer EXRs and stuff like that. Use this free download manager while you're working on the render network. So freedownloadmanager.org. Something else that's important while we're here, while we're talking about URLs and web addresses, is the render network that you want to be on is RNDR RNDR.x.io. So make sure that's the URL that you are on. I think there's a slightly different version, but this is the one that you're supposed to be on here, .x.io. All right, here we are. We're back to it here. I got my render settings set up. Let's go. Continue. Okay, so this is where you can choose your kind of priority. So we have priority 2 and we have economy. Economy is not going to be rendered as fast. You might be sharing resources more with other people, with other users on here. Priority is going to be a lot faster. Increased priority, so faster GPUs, all that kind of stuff. Now the pricing does go up, depending. Now, how do we get to the cost here? Well, if you look in the top right corner, you can see, and it's in euros, and then we have render credits here. You want to be using render credits, not tokens for this, okay? So use render credits. And with render credits, it's so easy to add money here because you say, how many credits would you like to purchase? You can just add that value in here. You can do it purchase with PayPal or through Stripe, Visa, MasterCard, Express, all that stuff. I mean, they really couldn't make it any easier. If you do tokens, you'll have to get in to connecting to a MetaMask wallet, buying render tokens, and exporting them over. I don't know if this works exactly like one-to-one for the value of what render tokens is to the actual value of like euro and dollars and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that just use the render credits. Just do that one, okay? Add render credits. Buy render token, but save that for yourself. So add render credits and the value here, and then you go to checkout and it'll proceed to your checkout process. I'm not going to do that because then everyone's going to steal my money or lack thereof. All right, cool. Here we go. I'm going to do the tier 2 priority. I'm in a rush here. Let's make this happen, right? I do economy all the time. It just depends on if I'm in a rush or how fast I want to get this back. Another beauty of this is, remember, once this is submitted, it's not going to be using any of the machine power of my own computer. It's not going to be making my room here boiling hot by having all my GPUs screaming, running at the same time, heating up my studio. I can go and work on another project. I can render other things on my computer locally. So this just frees up everything. So I'm going to check tier 2 priority, and let's go to the cost estimation sheet now. So in here, it's important that you look up your Octane bench score, really simple to do, and find out what GPUs you have, and you can really easily look up what your bench score is. I mean, you could just make a number up, but then it's not going to give you an accurate estimated cost. So I'm going to say, I've got two 2080 Ti's on the machine that I'm using right now, and that's about a bench score of 700. I think it's like 690 or something like that, but that's good enough. And then my time per frame, I'm going to say 2 minutes per frame, right? So it's important that, you've tested this locally if you want a real accurate estimate here. And it's saying priority is about $4 or credits, 4.26 render credits, where tier 3 economy is basically half that price, right? So you can weigh out. I mean, maybe you're in a rush, but you can only afford that. Well, if that's all you can afford, then that's what you do, right? But you have the option, which is really, really fantastic. Now, once this is all good to go, and you can change, seconds, minutes, hours, maybe you're only 30 seconds a frame or something like that. And here's the number of frames. I'm submitting them all. You just hit create job. And just like that, it's finding available nodes, and it's switched you from the scene submission tab into the job section. And this is where you can see the progress. So say show frame progress here. You can drop this tab down. At the minute, it says 18 in progress. And so 18, 26 in progress. So the minute it has frames in progress here, 29, right? So it's just submitting all those. And it will do this a lot quicker. Like I said, if you get your ORBX file and put it in a standard .zip folder, and it'll go to each one of these machines even quicker. So you can see 44 in process right now. Progress is at 11%. It's already rendering frames. These are, look, 15 frames are already done now. 17 frames are already done now. All right. And we're talking, these were on my machine. It was about a 2 to 3 minute long render per frame, where, I mean, what am I talking for? These are mere seconds. I can't describe to you how much I love the render network. And when you see the cost of it, for me, it makes no sense to render locally anymore, because I'm always doing multiple jobs at once. I'm always rendering multiple projects. I always need my machine. I can't have it be bogged down. And so, like I said, I do it for personal work. I do it for client work. I do it for test renders. I do it for all sorts of stuff. Look, frame progress, 82. We can begin to review it. I like reviewing them when they're all done, but you can say review all frames. You'll see that we may as well take a look here. While some are still processing, they're not fully realized and up there, but this is when it's a really good and important thing to just double check and make sure all the frames look good. So scroll through, see if there's something missing from any of them, if there's a material or some sort of lighting error, because sometimes you might have to resubmit one of those frames. And so if you check it and select it, and if something's wrong, you can say re-render that selection. Now make sure there's actually something wrong, right? That's important to not abuse that privilege, but you can re-render any specific scene here. So look at this. We only have a couple more left. I'll pop back out into the jobs, and you can see what frames it's still calculating. Once it's complete, then we're going to jump in and review these and hopefully approve them. All right, and now you'll see, total frames, 73 frames required for review. Let's check these. Let's say review all frames, bring us right back here. And this is where, go through, look at it, make sure it's exactly what you want. If not, you might have to resubmit a frame here or there. Again, that's going to be, on a individual basis here. they all look amazing to me. So I'm going to say select all frames and accept selection. Now this is where we can get ready to download. So I'm going to go to download outputs. Obviously, if you have multipass, you'll have that option in here as well. I don't want the beauty pass. I just want the denoise beauty, because remember I was using the Spectral AI denoiser. Perfect. Just download that denoise beauty pass. This will always be here if I want to come back and download it at a different time. And that's it. I mean, I only have 73 frames. They're PNGs. They're not crazy heavy. That's going to be no issue for me to download this all locally without having to use a download manager. But you got your download links and all that stuff in case you do want to use or need to use a download manager. Really easy to use. Definitely don't hesitate if you've got larger and heavier files or larger, bigger sequences or something. It's going to just work super quick, and it's well worth it. So I'm going to just say download all and begin download. And it's just going to go to wherever your specified desired download location is. So just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to get 73 frames in my download folder. So I'll be taking those and cutting them and putting them into a folder more specific for my 3D render sequences. Once this finishes downloading, we're going to hop into After Effects and let's just check this out. In the meantime, let's go back to our jobs and let's see how much this costs. 2.84 render credits. For me, well worth it. Took no time at all here. Was able to get that whole sequence out for 2.84 render credits. Absolutely amazing. Obviously I've rendered some sequences in the past that are a heck of a lot bigger, a lot longer. You can see the price will range here. This was when I was using render tokens. Don't use tokens, use the credits. And you can see I learned that lesson here, and now you don't have to. But again, go through and you can just see the cost of some of this stuff. Some of these were me just testing, a few frames here or there, but you can see, 5.16 render credits, 0.20 render credits, 0.81 render credits. So a lot of variation here depending on the sequence, what the size was, all that kind of stuff. But render's really great. All right, let's go into After Effects. Awesome, and let's import that image sequence that we got. And import PNG sequence, import. Let's add it to a new composition here, and let's just see what we got. So how simple is that? Unbelievable. Within a matter of minutes, able to get our rendered animation out. I'm able to work on any other machine while this is happening. I hope and I know you are all going to love render just as much as me. And sometimes I feel like it's just like getting in there and seeing how simple and easy it is to like sell you on like, okay, I've been doing this all wrong. And that wraps it up, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and even more so, I hope that now you're able to utilize the render network and the power of it. It's gonna save you time, super efficient, really easy to use. You know, any worries that you had maybe about using it, maybe you haven't done any render farms before, hopefully you see how amazing that was, and now it's like, okay, I gotta jump in and use it for my work. I promise you won't be disappointed. All right, peace.